I've made several recent episodes on this channel where the theme has been, who says they're not prog rock? In those episodes, I've explored various artists who were recording during the heyday of progressive rock in the early and middle 1970s, who were not directly associated with the prog rock genre, but who explored the genre in various, and in some cases really notable, entries in their repertoire. In this episode, I'm going to discuss 6 songs that, at least to my ear, are undeniably progressive rock flavored from artists that you don't necessarily associate with the genre, but who, in some cases, regularly experimented with prog rock. Some of these will surprise you, some of them probably won't. But in any event, it's fun to have the discussion. I'll cover these in chronological order. The first of the songs was recorded by the Beatles in early 1966, the classic Tomorrow Never Knows. This song should probably be more classified as psychedelic rock rather than progressive rock, but it was definitely a huge influence on the prog rock genre. In early 1966, the Beatles had, of course, retired from touring and were focusing all their work in the studio and exploring numerous techniques of how to record with their producer, George Martin, and with his assistants, Chris Thomas, Ken Scott, and Alan Parsons. Tomorrow Never Knows is one of the earliest of these, incorporating the use of tape loops, a technology that Paul McCartney was, in this time frame, very interested in, as well as an interesting technique for recording vocals, with John Lennon singing through the input of a Leslie speaker cabinet, a cabinet ordinarily used for shaping the sound of a Hammond organ. With lyrics directly inspired by Timothy Leary's and Ram Dass's Book of the Dead, this is clearly a psychedelic exercise. And John Lennon, who is the primary author of the song, would note on several occasions during his lifetime the impact that the use of LSD had on his thinking in this time period, and that he might very well have been under the influence of the drug when this song was first written. It's a song that jumps out at you from the speakers upon listen. It was a headphone classic back in its day, to be sure. Another song in that same category was recorded about a year later by the Rolling Stones, 2,000 Light Years from Home. 2,000 Light Years is, of course, from the Stones' psychedelic album, Their Satanic Majesty's Request, which is an album that's not tremendously well remembered by fans, insofar as that it's a huge departure from the Stones' blues-oriented canon. But it's a terrific record in the sense that the Stones, by virtue of their fame and the resources they had at their disposal, took all sorts of chances in recording this album. 2,000 Light Years is particularly notable because of the soundscape that it creates through the mellotron, played here by Brian Jones in one of his last significant contributions to the band before his departure, as well as various oscillators and theremin noises that were overdubbed to the finished product, with Bill Wyman playing the oscillator in particular. The Stones never recorded anything else quite like this, and as a result, it's not a song that was often featured in the Stones' live repertoire. It deserves to be remembered far better than it's been, though. It is a terrific song that is very much indicative of the time in which it was created. Jumping ahead a few years to our first American entry in this list is Green-Eyed Lady by Sugarloaf, recorded in early 1970 and released in the summer of '70. Green-Eyed Lady is a song that forever marked the summer of 1970 for me. It was all over both FM and AM radio in an edited version. The FM version of the song is nearly 7 minutes long, and it's a powerhouse track dominated by the Hammond organ played by the band's leader, the late Jerry Corbetta. I've spoken to many prog fans over the years who play keyboards who have cited that this was one of the songs that enticed them to play rock keyboards in the first place. And upon listening to it, it's easy to understand why. The organ part that Corbetta weaves here is a memorable one. His tone is terrific. His technique is terrific. His left hand provides a powerhouse of a bass line that is doubled by the band's bass player through most of the song. And it's just a wonderful piece of music. It still gets some level of radio airplay today, and it deserves it. The song was a huge hit in its day, reaching number 3 on the Billboard charts, with the success of the single carrying the album that it was on to the top 25 as well. The next entry on the list is also from an American band. From 1971, Halo of Flies by the original Alice Cooper group from their album Killer. Alice Cooper was a band that in some regards defied categorization, but one category that they were never placed in by the critics was as a prog rock band. Alice Cooper, particularly after the band emigrated back to Alice's hometown of Detroit, tended to be classified as glam rock or punk rock in the same breath as other Detroit area bands like the MC5 and the Stooges with Iggy Pop. With Halo of Flies, however, the band felt they had something to prove. They were tired of being classified as noise rock and wanted to show that they were every bit as talented as the prog rockers from England that were emerging. To that end, they put together an 8.5-minute long masterpiece of a song. With a great opening section, very much bolero-based. Dennis Dunaway's bass guitar of this track is massive between the sound and his technique. The song also makes use of a synthesizer played by the band's producer, Bob Ezrin, making it one of the first recordings by an American rock band to make use of a synthesizer. The Monkees, the Doors, and the Byrds, of course, had come earlier, but this was a melodic use of the synthesizer that was particularly intriguing. The lyrics of the song probably were something of a throwaway. Who comes up with the idea of a watch that turns into a lifeboat, for heaven's sake? But it's a very well-constructed song with a great opening, a strong song at its core, and a great ending section, again focusing on Dennis Dunaway's bass in large measure. It's a song that became part of Alice Cooper's live repertoire almost immediately upon recording, and has stayed in the band's live repertoire throughout Alice's touring existence. Obviously, the original Alice Cooper group would disband in 1975, but Alice would continue to play this song on a regular basis with other configurations of his group, with either Dick Wagner or more recently with Orianthi or Anita Strauss playing guitar. It's a great, great piece of work. Next, from the spring of 1973, is No Quarter by Led Zeppelin. This song is one of many from Led Zeppelin's early 1973 album, Houses of the Holy, that I could have chosen for this list. The song remains the same, and the Rain song could just as easily have been chosen, I suspect. But I chose No Quarter because it is a song that was always, upon its creation, retained as part of Led Zeppelin's set list as a showcase for John Paul Jones on keyboards and on bass guitar. Jones was the primary author of the song, and it is absolutely one of the hallmarks of his career. Last but not least, from October of 1973, is Elton John's masterpiece, Funeral for a Friend, Love Lies Bleeding, from his great double album, Goodbye Yellow Brick Road. This is a song that we've discussed at some length in one of the Who Says They're Not Prog episodes. Elton John was not a synthesizer player by any stretch. His instrument of choice always was and remains the piano. But on this track, the synthesizer is used to great effect by David Henschel, who by this time was already working with Genesis and other rock bands as a recording engineer, and who of course would go on to produce Genesis's late 70s recordings as well. But in the 1973 timeframe, Henschel was also doubling as a session musician and had made a synthesizer album of his own, one based on the contents of Ringo Starr's 1973 solo album. The synthesizers on Funeral for a Friend are captivating. Their sound is immense. The flourishes that Henschel plays here are brilliantly executed. The tonality of the instrument is strong. And the introduction of the song throughout its 5 minutes and change is never boring. It is a wonderful setup for the song Love Lies Bleeding that follows it. Despite the fact that the overall length of the two songs back to back was over 11 minutes, FM radio back in the day never attempted to edit it. It was one of the songs that was pretty much sacrosanct in 1973 and 1974 to hear on the radio. Because of its length, it's not often played on radio these days, but it is a song that is very well remembered. My prog rock band makes it a regular feature of our sets. The song almost always gets a standing ovation. Audiences love it. And the fact that they still do is testimony to how great the song is and how well it fits in the prog rock canon. There are many more examples I could have cited here, but I'll leave the list at 6 entries for now. If you have others that you would like to draw attention to or that you think should have been on this list, by all means, let me know in the comments. Of course, please hit like if you liked what you saw here today. And if you're not already a subscriber to Progpaganda, of course, please join us. At this point, we have a fairly substantial catalog of back episodes, and we're creating new episodes on a weekly basis. Thanks for joining us, as always. Take good care. Bye-bye.